Recently, I discussed the book Crave by Dr. Raphael Cuomo, and in that book, we talk a lot about how addiction and the feeling of craving and constantly satisfying that craving tends to develop the body's, um, you know, it tends to reduce the ability for the body to fight off cancer. Because why? It our body is generally good at fighting off near-term danger and long-term danger. But by constantly flooding ourselves with a constant amount of, I'm going to try my best to summarize it for you, the idea in the book. First of all, you warp your perspective around what is meaningful and good and the activities that you do in order to get to that state by doing really simple activities that take you out of your conscious zone. So that's dopamine, right? So dopamine is really easy. Now, you would know that depending on how you feel, your body also feels differently. So that's why when you're surprised, your heart beats and then it goes into flight or fight mode. And in that state, your metabolism changes, right? And so when you freeze up and when you're stressed, it's a very different digestive experience, for example, from when you're relaxed and on vacation. You know, your digestive system works differently depending on how you are stressed. So now you get dopamine, you get dopamine, you get dopamine, you get dopamine. And because of that, your body gets used to kind of a dopamine level that's just always kind of activated. Or it goes down and you just easily get it back up with more and more and more and more and more, right? So this has an effect on your other reward systems, like satisfying hunger. So there are many different ways of satisfying hunger, but what do we usually go out to grab? Sugar. And the refined and processed sugar tends to be a very important factor for insulin. And um, that is on the dietary side, right? So the more sugar you eat, the more your insulin resistance grows. So now your body, since it's always lagging behind sugar processing, glucose, conversion, it sort of forgets to do its job. Why? Because it's overloaded. It's like your computer always working at the threshold, and when you enough of that kind of a compute environment, you can't launch new applications because it's still backlogged on the things that it's trying to do, right? So the refined carbos and trans fats and these things also trigger some kind of a low grade immune activity, and that's what we commonly call like cortisol, right? So your cortisol gets activated, and on top of that, okay, so you have the activity wise, yeah, you have the dopamine stuff. Food wise, you have the quick rewards like sugar. And on top of that, you have this like whenever you feel lethargic, right? You want to get a boost with coffee. Or now it's so easy to get high caffeinated things. And these are usually accompanied with high amounts of sugar. So now you satisfy that urge, and then now your dopamine gets hit again. So it becomes kind of the symbiotic system between uh, stressors and things that really make your immune system go haywire. Why? Again, all of these things, once you sit down and think about it, it's not that complex. But the really deep implication here is that it goes down to you get used to a certain level of dopamine. You get used to a certain level of stimulus, and that is really dangerous for the body. Now, that's all about, you can read all about this in the book. But from the Buddhist perspective, right? If we think a little bit about constantly chasing, there's a very important nuance to this. So, if I keep needing to ask other people for money, am I affluent or am I in a state of deficiency? It's likely that if I keep needing to ask other people, then I'm in a state of deficiency. So, there is a life is a cycle, right? There's up and down, up and down. So there are times when you're satisfied, but then there are times where you're dissatisfied. But the thing is, one of the poisons of the mind that I talked about recently in my short videos is desire. So the more we desire, implicitly and transitively, what that ends up meaning is the more we make ourselves a deficient person. And again, at times you will actually be in need. At times you will actually be deficient. But the real core of the problem comes from the fact that slowly but surely, your internal definition of yourself becomes somebody who lacks. Your internal experience of you becomes this unfortunate person who can't really who can never really be satisfied. Not because our expectations are so high, because we're unlucky. Things are running so bad for us. And our constant dissatisfaction will warp our perspective into a victim. But don't get me wrong, sometimes in certain contexts and certain situations, we actually will be victims to certain situations. But there's a very big difference between situational and contextual victimhood versus perpetual victimhood. And one of the mechanisms of how we arrive at that state is constant yearning, constant desire, this constant need to chase for the next high. So, if you want to check out more of this argument and discussions around how systemic structures are reinforcing this relationship with craving and what you can do to counteract this, please check out Dr. Rafael Cuomo's book, Crave: The Hidden Biology of Addiction and Cancer. I'll link to it in the description below.